One of the biggest questions I get from people in the entertainment business trying to make it in the entertainment business is about reality programming. We see reality programs all the time. They're the staple of primetime programming for many networks, and it's been going on for a long time. It's interesting that in the early days of reality, I thought the cycle would run out. A lot of people thought that cycle would run out, but they're more popular than ever. So today we're going to talk about two guys who are having a great career in the reality business, Matt McCartie and Sean Kelly. They're both producers. Matt's also an editor of some top of the line A-list reality shows. And we're going to answer some questions and talk about their career. And if you've ever had a question about reality, if you've ever had that great idea that you've always wanted to pitch, or you wanted to know more about how to get into that business, this is the episode for you. Okay, Sean, Matt, welcome to the Phil Cooke podcast. This is our first time you've been on, I think.
For sure. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Phil.
I am thrilled to have you on. And today, I really want to talk about reality television. I'm not sure if there's a genre, if you'd call it a genre of television, that is more misunderstood. And everybody thinks they have an idea for a reality show. Everybody wants to do one, but it's once they get into it, they realize that it's not what they thought it was. In fact, I think I've had at least 50 scripts sent to me from churches alone, because they think their team is so awesome in their church, they could redo The Office with their church team. And they're terrible. Usually they're absolutely terrible. But tell me a little bit about your career, shows you've worked on. Matt, why don't we start with you? Shows you've worked on, what you're doing now. Give me just a little update.
Yeah. I was a musician all the way, well, still am. But I was in a band in college and we were signed, but still not making any money. And a couple of my friends were like, hey, I'm making like $400, $500 a week working at MTV. Like, you should get on that. And I was like, yes, I should. And my first boss, I was like a PA, like everybody, at MTV. And my first boss was an associate producer in development at MTV. And I married her. So that was 28 years ago, was kind of the beginnings of the TV journey.
Wait, you'll do anything to advance your career. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, just sleeping my way to the top, So anyway, I didn't, I wanted to tour the world with records. I had really no desire to really get into TV. It was sort of served a purpose. And so I was kind of doing music and TV in tandem. And then I ended up becoming a music coordinator. So working underneath a music supervisor at the Real World. And then went into the scripted world over at Disney and was on a show called Popular. And just wanted to hey, if I was going to have to work, I want to work around music. So I thought this is a perfect marriage of hanging out with music publishers and artists, and I'm a musician and this is going to be great. And I found music supervision to be the most uncreative job ever. I mean, all I did was just fight over money with music publishers and labels and, angry producers who were trying to figure out why I didn't have a song cleared by the mix and whatever. And so I went to my wife and she said, "You hate what you do." And I said, "Yeah, I don't love it." She said, by this point, my wife is now an executive producer, ironically and coincidentally with Sean's wife. And their careers are kind of cracking along. And she said, "Hey, just, don't want to influence you too much." But she said, "I have found in my experience that my favorite editors are all rhythm musicians or very musically inclined." And she said, "Just throwing it out there, not telling you what to do." And I said, "Well, I work with editors all the time as a music supervisor. I sit behind them half of my day every day. Certainly know my way around the edit bay, not the equipment, but just the vernacular and, And so I said, "Look, let's give it a go." So I started overnighting assistant editing at Behind the Music. Did that for a little while and was able to transition out and start full time during the day, which is the biggest gift when you're a new editor, is not having to do overnights is the best thing ever. went over to G4, and in those days, like MTV was really hopping. Like they had all of the coolest shows. We were in Santa Monica, and that building there was just like alive. And then they got the building next door, and then the building next door to that. I mean, it was like floors and floors full of edit bays, and it was a great time to kind of be in that genre and in that building because there was just so much going on.
Yeah, MTV is running the world at that time, right? Like ever since like 80s all the way through like early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, the first day that I ever worked as like a full-time editor, my wife, we were down to one car. We were like, rice and beans, as Dave says. And my wife picked me up from work and took me out to our favorite pub and revealed that we were going to have a baby. So whenever I wonder how long I've been editing, I just remember how old my first daughter is, and that's how long I've been doing it. So I ended up just really sticking with it and really starting to kind of enjoy it, and was able to move on to shows like Big Brother, Hell's Kitchen, and I've been on, I produced and edited America's Next Top Model for like 13 seasons. And I have subsequently, recently kind of I just wrapped actually season 16 of Shark Tank. So been doing Shark Tank for 12 seasons now, 13 seasons now.
Wow.
Yeah. And the show won an Emmy this year. And so it's been a good year. So that's kind of my probably long-winded editing journey.
That's great. That's great. Sean, how about you? How did you get into the business?
Well, I was in college with the hopes of being an architect, but still undeclared. And probably 2 years into college, a friend told me that the best, easiest way to get your degree is just go into radio, TV, and film. So yeah, I'll take the easy route to get that diploma. So I did that and started to really like it. And from there, got internships and then got PA jobs, and then started taking like the production managerial route, where I became like a production coordinator, where you're in charge of just setting everything up and handling the overhead in the offices and just everything, which was a grind. Working 7 days a week. One of my first shows was a game show called Debt with Wink Martindale, which was kind of like a Jeopardy style game show where you could pay off your debt. And much like Matt, on that show, I found my wife, or she found me, and as she was a producer too. So while I was doing coordinating, I kind of found the same thing that Matt found, where it was like, well, it's really not creative work. And I always wanted to be like the producers that I was setting up for.
Yeah.
And that mixed with the fact that it was such a grind, I decided just to take a step back and ended up getting a 7-year gig, I think, with DreamWorks, working in finance, it was just a change for me. It was a 9-to-5 job.
That's a super switch.
Total switch. I'm like, you know what? DreamWorks is up and coming. It was like during their very first film, which was Prince of Egypt, which was an animated show. And I worked with the head of finance for the animation studio and overseeing all that. And just over time, and I had just different careers within DreamWorks, but I also found that I had so much time after I got my work done at work to come up with show ideas. Because for some reason, I just had a knack for and this desire to come up with like game shows. And I don't know what it was. I don't know what set it off. So I just started typing up game shows. And back at that time, it was like late 90s, early 2000s, I would send off ideas to executives, right?
Yeah.
You can't do now. You can't just be like, hey, my name is Sean and I have a great idea. So got a little bit of traction, but nothing big. But at the same time, I would also brainstorm and come up with shows with Matt's wife and my wife, Dawn, and got some stuff to pilot, which was exciting. And then ultimately I joined a think tank, which I did for years, where it was just twice a week going in and coming up with ideas with other people who love to create ideas, which was a lot of fun, exercised my brain a lot. And ultimately, one of those shows ended up being sold to CBS. So for me, it was like, all right, this is my time to jump and get out of DreamWorks and get into producing and doing the creative end of it all. So that was kind of like my jump into being a producer. And then from there, I started developing like this niche.
Yeah, the Brits say niche, I say niche.
Well, I'm trying to satisfy any viewer of this. So, but my niche was coming up with challenges for shows. Like I worked on Big Brother, where I was helping out with coming up with the backyard challenges they would play.
Yeah.
Or Biggest Loser, came up with those challenges, and then worked on Minute to Win It, where I was in charge of coming up with all the games for Minute to Win It, and then started traveling to help sell that show. And just one thing led to another. And ultimately I got a random call from this girl I worked with at Big Brother, who then went to Fox TV Studios and said, hey, we want to do an overall deal with you.
Wow.
So it was like a dream come true. So from there I got into Fox Studios and just got in the game of coming up with show ideas and trying to sell them and produce them. So I was there for, I think like 8 years. From there, I went to Comcast for 2 years because Fox TV Studios shut down. Okay. So I went to Comcast, and there I brought this guy, Steve Hughes, with me, who became my partner. So we got the deal together there. And then from there, went to MGM under Mark Burnett. And I've been at MGM under an overall deal for I'm on my 9th year right now. But done a bunch of shows, created a lot, everything from a show called TKO with Kevin Hart, which Matt actually edited. Show ran Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader with John Cena for Nickelodeon. And then did the new version, Are You Smarter Than a Celebrity with Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
I just recently did a show called Wishlist Games with Nick Cannon, and all types of other fun competition shows, game shows. And this is what I love doing. So,
it's interesting. I know a lot of successful producers who have made a lot of money in the business who will say, I've been successful, but I'll die without figuring out the audience, what they like, what they don't like. Reality shows are like movies. Some make it, some don't, probably more don't than do. It's a risky business, right?
For sure. Well, it really is risky because so many people and so many of my friends and so many producers in this business are strictly freelance, which means you're only working when you're on a job. And once that job is over, after a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you're looking for your next job. So a lot of people aspire to coming up with ideas and then pitching them, but usually you're like, oh, wait, I don't have time for that. I have to figure out how to get my next producing job so I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
So I've been lucky enough for the last almost 2 decades to be under an overall deal where I get a paycheck to come up with ideas. So that's been a huge blessing.
That's not a terrible thing. I come up with ideas for free. I need to get on that train. That's a great. That's great. So Matt, let me ask you. We talk about reality being non-scripted. How non-scripted is it? I mean, do you know where you're going? Do you lay out an outline for an episode? I imagine a lot of the story is told in the edit room, I would guess. Tell me about how it plays out as far as the storyline in a typical episode.
Yes, we now lovingly refer to it as unscripted because reality
unscripted,
such a dirty, such a bad name. Honestly, Phil, it just depends on the show.
Yeah.
So you're going to look at like a show like Kardashians, and they're going to have the whole like season sort of plotted out for you. And it's going to seem like reality because they're going to be like, okay, let's get you 3 girls in I don't watch that show, but watch it enough. Like we'll get 2 ladies in the kitchen. And a lot of shows are like this. Chanel could probably name like 3-5 other shows that I would call produced reality. So it's like, you get them in the room and you go, we're starting here and you need to get here by the end of the scene. Go. And they sort of unleash them, and it's sort of fumbly and they'll screw it up and a producer will stop them, get them do a line differently, blah, blah, blah. But by the end of the scene or they'll call cut when they kind of get where they need to go. And I think that's kind of like produced or like very heavily coached, reality. Yep. I think anything that's like what we call like a shiny floor show is anything like on a stage. So like an actual stage. So it's Masked Singer. I would argue, I mean, Sean, would you call Shark Tank shiny floor? Not really.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Anything that's basically in a studio, right?
Yeah. Like shot on like a stage that has kind of like that kind of vibe.
We're talking a lot of improv, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, but you look at like show like Shark Tank when the entrepreneurs come out, our producers have worked with them for weeks to make sure that pitch is dialed right. And because when they come out, I mean, I'm sure people, how come they never they occasionally do, and sometimes we'll leave it in, but like they'll fumble or forget their lines or whatever. But it's we want it to be slick and like rockin', and then the exchange is very much unscripted, right? Okay. The questions the sharks are asking in the back and forth is definitely. So you can go from like true full on docs, like with some of the like crazy like Living by Yourself in Alaska shows, that my wife watches. Like I don't know to what degree those are fixed, or if it's like, hey Tim, we're gonna go out and shoot moose today. And they go, you know what I mean? Because ultimately, and this is what it comes down to, time is money, right? So
true.
What I have to do is I have to get you moose hunting. And so chop, like, let's get to it, because I can't spend all day on your moose hunt. So let's drive you in a helicopter to where the moose is so we can watch you shoot it and get back and get everybody off the clock.
So this means as an editor, Matt, you start with a boatload of video, right? I mean, there must be a ton of footage.
So much. And then depending on the show, I did So You Think You Can Dance last year. And what I think is I don't know if it's technology, but like a role that's sort of being added to for show producers. And we've had like story producers and different types of producers forever. But I would say probably in the last 7 to 10 years, they've all had to learn how to run nonlinear editing systems. They all have to learn Avid, because what they'll do is they'll actually go through the raw for you, and they'll take an hour of raw like reality footage, and they'll say chop it down to like 15 minutes. You have to get it down to 5.
You're right.
From their 20, but what they're going to do is they're going to go, this is kind of the story I want to tell. And they'll give you like a string out that's like way too long, but at least you're not like diving into like hours of like just raw, unmitigated, free for all. And then that ultimately saves me time when I get into it. I'm like, cool, I know where we're going, and I can go, boop, 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 boop.
He's the moose hunter. He's the one moose hunting, right? Like, you can't pay a seasoned editor like Matt to sort through everything. You just want him to do the gold, really.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, with this non-scripted thing or unscripted thing in mind, I was talking to Barry Posnick at MGM a year or two ago, who you work with, and he was telling me, the nature of unscripted is he would rather have, if you're pitching him an idea, the idea is not as important as the personality of the star of the show. What is the Duck Dynasty may be a good example. Nobody really cares what that show's about. There's such a peculiar family that people are fascinated by it. And so I think in pitching shows, tell me about how important the lead actors, the stars, those characters are versus the actual storyline or the actual setting.
Well, for sure, when it comes to those docuseries where you're following people around, like Matt was talking about, it's so contingent on these loud personalities. Also, to have a recognizable name. So it's like you have that built-in audience, right, who knows what you're for. Or just a crazy job or relationship that the cast has that is just so out there that it's like, oh, we have to see what this is like, right? I personally don't get that involved with docuseries. I'm more formatted, whether it's big competition shows, game shows. So that's my bag. But when it comes to that, you definitely the same thing with what Barry said about the docuseries. It's less about the idea. You would think, oh, a great idea is going to make waves. But these days, the idea is just a fraction of it. You really have to have the auspice. An auspice meaning a big name attached, a big IP or brand, whether that's someone sponsoring it, right?
Yeah.
Or a big, like, for example, one of the properties that MGM has is called Beat Shazam, but it basically took the Shazam music app and they turned that into a game show. So it's a familiar game that people know and recognize. It's like, oh, I'll check that out. So it's those things that really help bring projects to life. Also, as long as it's if it's a known format, like a lot of the times they'll take popular formats from overseas and bring them over because they've already been proven, right? You don't have to put a pilot together to see if it works. You know it works. You know it has an audience. So they just take those and they bring them over here. Like Matt mentioned, Masked Singer. That was an idea that came over and that was a hit here. So it's IP, it's sponsorship, bringing money to the table. That also helps too. Or just known entities or a big celebrity name is huge.
You know, a few years ago, I was at an academy, a TV academy event in Hollywood, and standing in the buffet line, I started a conversation with one of the producers of Naked and Afraid. You know that show?
I love it.
Talk about a strange, bizarre idea, but he said, we were talking about kind of the myth of reality. He said, you know, these are two people, a man and a woman, who have been put out in the middle of nowhere in a jungle somewhere, or a desert, a distant, remote, incredibly remote place, and they have to make their way. And he said, although if you pan the camera left, you're going to find the craft service tent over here. You're going to find the equipment truck over here. He said, we've got about 60 people standing by for the shoot. So, you know, people at home, it's just funny. It's called reality, but it's actually, most of those kind of shows are not reality at all, right?
Correct. And Naked and Afraid, I mean, I haven't worked on it, but I am to assume that the craft service and everything is for just crew and stuff. I don't think they're actually feeding those people because that's such a huge part of the show is like, how long can they go without eating or till they find food? But yeah, a lot of that, like, yeah, you're right. Off camera, there's everything to house the production or support the production to make it easy.
Same with like Survivor or something like that, right? They can't mess with the integrity of the show play. So there is a lot to, you know, even like Bachelor and Bachelorette, right? Like they have to be really careful when there's prizes involved and people involved where there's a lot of bumpers in place that when you start to get to, I mean, they're really careful about, you know, contestants dating crew. Like there's just a lot of these kinds of things where it's like, it is the opposite of a free for all. I think it used to be a lot more so when you had like, you know, the Jackass and Bam Margera. I worked on an early Bam Margera show where it was just like, although a lot of that was really produced too. It was like, we're going to go to this ramp and like see how we can fly off into a pool or, you know, whatever.
And a lot of it's for the safety of the cast too, right? Like for Naked and Afraid, you see those night shots where they're around the campfire, it's dark out, and all of a sudden they hear something growling. And yeah, it makes it seem scary, but guarantee you there's someone right off camera with a shotgun that's just waiting to protect.
And then the editors are going to put it together in a way where it's like, oh my gosh, they might die right now. You know, like, I don't know if they're going to make it, and we're going to like ramp up the music and head turns and shots and sound effects and you know, in my world, as opposed to like film editors, that's all me.
Yeah. Although in Jackass, I'm not sure how much safety there was for the cast, but because they did some crazy stuff. It's interesting. So you mentioned earlier that we're not in an era anymore where somebody could just go up and pitch an idea. If I've got an idea out there, I'm out in TV podcast land listening to this or watching it, and I just have a burning idea for a reality show. Any tips for what to do with it?
Tough one, because to get through doors, right? For people to hear it, like a network or a production company, it has to usually come in through an agent or a lawyer, right? Just
Yep.
because you don't want just some random person throwing out an idea, and then all of a sudden it's like it's either A, you're wasting the executive's time, or B, like they're going to come around and now sue you because you already had something in development. Obviously, there's things to hedge that, like a non-disclosure agreement that protects you, but it is quite hard if you have no contacts to try to get a show out there. If you're a friend of mine and you have a show and you're not in the business, I'll totally listen to an idea and help push it. And if there's traction, then we figure it out from there, right?
Right.
But at least I'm someone that MGM trusts to bring in ideas. So sometimes if it comes from an outside source, I just have to loop them into the deal if it's something that does happen.
I think the trust thing is really more important than most people realize. If I have a great idea for tweaking a race car for the Indy 500, nobody's going to care because I've not built any trust with Ford or Penske or any of the owners of those car racing teams. It's true in any business. If I'm seeing a court case unfold in the newspaper and I have a great idea for how to solve it, they're not going to listen to me because I have no legal background. So I think it's the same in Hollywood. It's funny because we watch TV all the time. We see movies. We think, well, I've got a better idea than that. Let me go pitch that. But the truth is, it's very hard to get to people that can help you make that happen without some sense of track record in the industry, some sense of trust in the industry. I think it really doesn't matter.
Like if you have that one great idea, it's going to be hard to get it through. I mean, what you could do is just start banking a bunch of ideas and then potentially go to like a boutique agency who might listen to them. And if they see that, wow, there's a good roster of ideas here, they may take a chance and help push it for you. But again, it's tough. It's tough.
It's a relationship game like anything, right? So it's all about relationships and I will tell you, Phil, because I'm developing and have been developing shows on the side for quite a while. And I've been in this business for 25 years and there's such turnover at all these places. People that I used to be able to pitch ideas to are no longer there.
Yeah.
Casey and I have optioned ideas before that will get optioned by a production company. And then they'll have like a 6-month shopping agreement term and then the network won't pick it up. And then we get the idea back and then another company optioned it. And I mean, it really is a relationship game. And I don't think you can just, and this happens all the time for both Sean and I know where people will be like, hey, I've got this great idea. Can I send it to you? And we can definitely like help them punch it up or whatever. But ultimately, I'm trying to pitch my own stuff and not having great success because I don't know a lot of the gatekeepers. Sean's really limited on what he can pitch. And it's really, I guess the point is it's just a lot harder than people think. And, a buddy of mine who just started a company with a really famous country singer, it took him 25 years in the business to get to the point where, he could forge a relationship like that. Now he's starting to kick stuff out because he's got names attached. They already done one show that was really successful. And I think you get to a point where you hit that centrifugal force and you have that kind of inertia behind you and people trust you and you've already got hits on the air. It's the Mark Burnett story at the end of the day, right? Where it's just like, it starts to snowball and roll down the hill. And until then, you just gotta Sean and I have a litany of friends that have sold stuff before and are struggling to get the second one sold, right? Or they'll get it optioned and the network doesn't want it. And so I think it's a numbers game. I mean, Sean, I don't want to totally sell Sean out here, but Sean told me the library of show ideas that he has sitting on a hard drive with sizzles cut, ready to pitch. It's in the hundreds. He doesn't have 3 ideas and he's just this is my little train that could, he's cranking content.
Partner, I probably have at least for sizzles, probably like 600 of them, maybe.
Okay, I'll let him sell himself out.
Jeez.
Yeah, but but again, it's a numbers game, right? For every 100 that you pitch, you might get one on the air or sold, right?
Cool.
But just to jump off of the relationship thing, yeah, it's so true. And even now today, it's even more difficult because of technology and AI, where there are a lot of TV executives who are like network executives who are going on ChatGPT, typing some stuff in, and an idea is coming out, and they're like, "Oh, that's not bad. Let me call my buddy and see if he could develop it and produce it for us." And it's kind of skipping the whole process of pitching ideas, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so it's,
Yeah. I tell people all the time that, when you go in to pitch an idea, the worst thing in the world about that idea is if it's the only one you have.
That's good.
I find it, generally speaking, people will take my second, third, or fourth idea if they take one at all. But I know guys that have spent their whole career on one idea, pitching one movie or one idea for a television program.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, you got to have a deeper bench than that. I actually was I wrote like 6 scripts early in my career. I had 6 scripts I was ready to go with. I'd go into a producer's office one after another, and they would just go right through them and drop them all in the trash and move on. And I learned pretty early on that it's not one idea. It's a multiple ideas you better have if you're going to be successful.
And you never know when you're going to meet somebody that, like, I mean, I will say I have a couple of shows that I've had in my back pocket for a handful of years. One in particular is like a minute, and I'm so passionate about it that I'm not pitching it actively, but like literally in the last like 6 months, they're starting to be like, oh, they would actually like this show. But you have that kind of like that sort of bin full of these ideas, and then you meet somebody and you're like, oh, you're actually looking for a game show about clowns.
Yeah.
I happen to have one of those,
Yeah.
Now you're ready, depending on who you stumble across, at coffee, or like, oh, that's funny. I know somebody over at fill in the blank. I just met them the other day and they're looking for canoe shows. And you're like, amazing. I'm going to develop a canoe show. So it's great, like you said, to have that deep bench. You may not be like running to somebody going, look at my bench, but you've got it kind of a full quiver so that if an opportunity or a relationship comes around, you're like, I've got one of those. And it's like, ta-da, and you've kind of got it at the ready. So I think that's a good reason to just have, like, it's a great term, a deep bench.
Yeah. And you have to be willing to kill your babies, right? Like, some people are just, they just don't give up. I mean, that's my reaction, is like, you have to be able to move on and just have play the volume game. But then you hear the stories, everything from Survivor to Traders, where they've pitched 40 times, and finally the network's like, you know what, fine, let's just and it works. I mean, those are rare, but you do hear those stories too. So I would never want to tell people to give up, but you just have to be able to move on too.
Let me ask you this. You're both married to producers of reality shows. How does that work?
That was just God's grace and coincidence. My wife is actually, when we had our first baby, and this may be sort of true for Dawn as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but we kind of got into like two parents in the industry trying to raise a kid, and just realizing that if we keep on this path, we're going to have someone else raise our kid, because when you have to be in the office, you're never sure when you're going to leave. Yeah. And to have 2 people in the house that are kind of on like I'll be home at nighttime kind of schedule, it really became untenable for our family. And so my wife actually put down what I would consider to be a career that was cracking along and on its way up. And she pushed pause on that for 18 years.
Wow.
And mostly, for the most part, raised
homeschooling.
We got two kids out of the house. And Sean and I, in the last 3-4 years, have moved from Los Angeles to Franklin, Tennessee, which is where we are now. And with 2 kids off to college, my wife decided it was a good time to see what was out there, which is ironic because she decided to kickstart her TV career after leaving Los Angeles and moving to Franklin, and obviously not a lot going out here in that. More coming along for sure in the last 2 years, but she's recently is now a producer at a company called Studio Now, and she's their EVP over there, and they do a lot of brand work and corporate videos and different things like that. So she's been able to do like 3 or 4 docs for the company. She's been to Poland and Israel, and documentaries I think are really like her like sweet spot and her bread and butter that she really loves. And since moving here, when I'm not on a show, I'm actually editing for her. So there's, to go back to your original question, we've found like a cool kind of teamwork, camaraderie, even like coming up with show ideas. And I'm constantly like, babe, what do you think? And I'll run in the other room and throw one sheet in front of her. And, right now she's on a plane, but she's typing a script for a sizzle that we're in the middle of editing for a new show idea. And so she gets to kind of write, and we can kind of bounce back and forth. And so there's like a creative partnership.
That's great.
It's really fun.
That's great. How about you, Sean? How does it work with you?
Same general story. I mean, our paths have been so parallel to the point where we're literally living right next to each other. So, but yeah, I mean, my wife, again, she was an EP along with Casey, and when we started having kids, decided to homeschool. And now that we're out here and kids are starting to, I mean, I have 2 boys, one's in college and one's a junior in high school. So I think she's kind of segueing back in. I know she's definitely, it's on her heart to really do some God stories and focus on that. So she's getting back in the swing of things with pushing that, really. I mean, she really, that's her heart. I mean, that's all of our hearts, really. Friendly God stories. But it's exciting, and it's worked out. So,
well, it's funny. I've talked to so many people in the industry over the years that have said, I've done all kind of shows. It doesn't matter if it was episodic drama, game shows, reality, whatever. And they said, I've done shows that I just hated. And now, in this point in my career, I want to do something that matters. I want to do something spiritual, or I want to do something for the family, or I want to do something that really matters. And I just find that among a lot of people. It sounds like you're feeling the same way.
For sure. 100%.
Absolutely. Yep.
And yeah, definitely. I really cling to like the family friendly, which right now is kind of making a resurgence, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing it through film, through TV shows, and I'm just trying to figure out how to hit it the right way traditionally game shows are family friendly, so I have at least that going for me, but it's just a space that I love to be in, and it's more fulfilling.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me run a last question by you here. You spent a significant part of your career in LA, and that's where you got into the business. And now that you're in Franklin, you're still doing Hollywood stuff. You're still doing major, top level A-list reality programming. Would that have happened had you always been in Franklin or some other place like that? Or was it important to get into the industry by being in the center of it in LA for a while at least? Was that important for your career?
100%.
Yeah. I think for me, there's no way just on a practical level that I could have. I mean, when I got in, there was no such thing as remote. There was no such thing as editing anything at home. I mean, Avids were huge pieces of hardware and mixers and towers and the whole thing. Like when I was first assistant editing, it was nothing compared to now. There was pretty much only one software, and everybody used it, and nobody was like hobby, editing, and you certainly couldn't edit on your phone. And so from a practical standpoint, I had to be in that city to, not only edit, but also build relationships. I mean, it's vital to, be in the office with, most of the big shows I work on, we have 10, 12, 15 editors, all in the building, and vital. So yes, I would say even now coming up, I know some young editors that have tried to start their editing career remote and are trying to grow it remote, and they're having a really hard time, even like in the Atlanta area. in the reality space, it's been really, really tough. So, but to flip that on its ear, having done that, I'm born and raised California kid. It was, I mean, I still remember very vividly doing a show with Ben Stiller at NBC the Tuesday or Wednesday that COVID, like we literally walked in the building and then walked back out. Sean was like driving to his office and they flipped everybody around. And within 4 days, a technology that everybody said we could never use and never do, I started cutting from my studio in LA it was a pretty crude setup.
Yeah.
And pretty jittery and not pretty, but it worked. And then within, a matter of months, it was like lightning fast, like the improvements to software and, latency and all this sort of stuff. It was just getting better and better and better. And then, we managed to, just by the grace of God, they managed to shoot a season. They shot Shark Tank in 2020, in the summer of 2020. They did it in a arena in Vegas, and they made people quarantine in their hotel rooms for 2 weeks before it was incredible, but nobody was working.
Yeah.
We were just like, what is going to happen? After that first show that I did, that NBC show that I did, after that wrapped, no one had shot anything. There was nothing in the can, so there was nothing to edit. And I'm freelance, and I was like, oh no, what are we going to do? And so luckily Shark Tank shoots. And then by July, August, we're back up and running, and I'm cutting from home. And my EP at the time was like, hey, just so you know, this is so rad and such a great setup for us. And we're saving so much money, because most shows, if you're not on a studio lot, even if you are, it's coming out of your budget. They're renting edit bay space, right? So you're in an office building in Hollywood or whatever. They'll rent that floor, set up edit bays, and then 4 months, it'll be empty again. So I'm constantly, depending on what show I'm on, I'm in Burbank, I'm in Hollywood, I'm in the West Side, and then 3 months later, new place, right? So the amount of money they're saving not having to rent all that space out is really considerable. Anyway, she came to me and said, I think we're just going to do this show from home forever. And I was like, well, we've kind of been wanting to leave LA. If this is going to be a thing, this work from home thing, maybe we can bounce now. And my wife came to Franklin with some friends, Dawn included, and they fell in love with it. And within 8 months, we were out. Wow. We were out of there. And so I've been able to work on a lot of these shows coming here just because of the relationships that I had, from being there for so long. And I think it would be, like I said before, really difficult to try and establish and develop a career in your bedroom on your computer. Even if you've got chops, no one's going to know that unless you're, at the premiere party and you're on the set and you're at the mixer and you're at the union special screening for the editors union or whatever, and stuff that admittedly I'm missing out on now. You know what I mean? There's still times where I'm like, I need to go to LA for a week and just take some lunches and do some coffees where people are like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. I liked working with that guy.
And he lost some weight.
It's what's that?
Sean, is it a similar story for you? Was it critical for you to be there?
Yeah, there's no way I could have had my career without living in LA. Lived in LA my whole life. And obviously when COVID happened, we all kept things going, but from home, we proved that we can make it work. And it was a time where when we decided to make the move, the timing was just great. I mean, thank God, I have a partner, Steve, who is in LA, who's able to now things are back to kind of normal and they're in the office most days. And so he's there. I'm on Zoom. I fly in every month or two, depending on if there's meetings or productions going on. So it was that, but it was also, like I said, the timing. Like my boss, Barry, I came to him and said, this is what we plan on doing. And at the time, he was like, that's great. Go for it. Sounds like a good idea. We don't know when we're going back to the office. And then it was literally 2 weeks later that they're like, oh, we're going back. He said, like, if you asked me 2 weeks later, I don't know if I would have had the same response. So, so it was all God. It was everything. So
Fantastic.
Thankful.
Well, thank you so much. Let me ask you this before we go: if there was one last thing you could leave with people about reality programming, about your career, about whatever in the industry, what would you say?
It's kind of general, but I would say that the hard work and not giving up does matter. Like, sure, you could come up with that great idea, but for me, it was like I just lived and breathed it and dove in. And on my free time, I would just type up ideas and just not stop. And it became like muscle memory to come up with ideas because it's a volume game. So just stay at it, because you're going to get discouraged a lot. There's going to be a lot of discouragement throughout your career if you decide to take this on. And don't let that stop you from doing what you like. Like, you're going to be your own audience until you get it on the air. So if there's an idea that you like, stand behind it.
Fantastic. Matt?
Learn how to take notes.
Oh, very good. Explain.
You're going to get not take notes, receive notes. I've been doing this a long time, and I still find myself getting like a little torqued when a producer's like, I don't like that song, or I don't think it's that funny, or you know.
Yep.
And I'm like, I know best. You know, like, you really have to, whether it's a development exec who's critiquing your show idea, or it's a producer who watches a cut and sends you 25 notes and tells you that your creative vision is kind of crappy. You have to be able to take those notes.
Yep.
And see them as an opportunity to look at a piece differently. That person is hopefully a pretty talented human being, and they're looking at it a certain way, and ultimately they're accountable to the people above them. And you have to go like, cool, I don't think that's right, but I'm going to take the opportunity. And I can't tell you how many times when you read that note initially and you're like, this is dumb, I don't want to do this.
Matt,
do it.
Matt, I'm sorry. Maybe I should have worded it differently when I gave you some. Are you talking about me?
No, I'm talking about my wife who gives me notes. No, you have to learn how to take the note and then see it as an opportunity to go like, look, I'll try it. And I can't tell you how many times that I've gone and tried a thing and been like, you know what? It's so much better.
Yeah.
It's so much better. I'm glad that we went down that road. And it doesn't always happen that way, but I'm telling you, I just know so many people, they get torqued out, it's spun out when they get notes. They take it really personally. Like, they're like, I think you're terrible and you shouldn't even be in this business. It's like, it's not what she's saying. That's not what he's saying. Like, let's, take a step. And you can get that with scripts, Phil. I'm sure you've had that before.
Oh, yeah.
Show ideas, cuts, whatever you bring to the table. Don't take it personally. Like, everybody's trying to like get this ball down the field and score a touchdown together. And, just be a great team player,
Both good words. Well, thank you, Sean, Matt, both for being on. This has been great. I will put in the show notes, everything people need to know about you guys and the shows you're working on and your careers. And so thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks for having us, Phil.
Pleasure. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Well, I'm grateful to Matt and Sean for being a part of the podcast. They're doing it. They're doing it on their terms. They're living in Franklin, Tennessee, still working on Hollywood A-list, top-of-the-line reality programs. And so they're doing what a lot of people dream of. So stay up with their careers. Keep looking out for their shows. They're doing some remarkable work. And for following up on what we're doing, and by the way, following up, I would like you to go to my blog at philcooke.com, but let me ask you to share this with people. People in this case who like reality programming or interested in it and wonder how it works or have ideas for it. Share this episode. We would love for you to share all these episodes as much as you can, because that really helps us move up in the ratings. It gets us noticed. It gets a bigger audience and helps impact more people's lives. So hang in there. I really appreciate you being with us today, because it was kind of a fun episode. Those guys are terrific. And we're going to be doing more really top-of-the-line interviews coming up in the near future. So stay tuned. Look out for the Phil Cooke podcast, however you're getting it, on audio, on video, wherever. keep looking out because we're coming up. We have some scheduled shows that are going to be amazing. Stay tuned.